It's April 2011, inside the Tropicana in Atlantic City. A man in a gray hoodie sits at the blackjack table, $100,000 riding on every hand. He has been there 12 hours. Security has him on 4 cameras. The pit boss keeps circling back, offering a break he never takes. He isn't counting cards. Nobody can find a system, a signal, a tell. He simply keeps winning, hand after hand, in front of a floor that has stopped pretending not to watch. By the time he stands up and says he's done, the casino will call this session the worst loss in its history. His name is Don Johnson. Over the next 6 months, he will take $15 million from 3 Atlantic City casinos, in full view of their own cameras, without breaking a single rule. The casinos wrote every rule themselves. This is how they lost it. To understand how, you have to go back 4 years, to a city that was already dying. In 2006, Atlantic City casinos brought in $5.2 billion. It was the best year the boardwalk had ever seen. High rollers filled every table, and money moved through the floors like it had nowhere else to go. Then 2008 arrived. The financial crisis gutted the stock market, and people who were losing money everywhere else stopped looking for places to lose more of it. At the same time, a second blow landed. Pennsylvania legalized casino gambling. Gamblers in Philadelphia no longer needed a 2-hour drive across state lines to place a bet. They had a casino floor down the street, closer, cheaper, easier. By 2010, Atlantic City's casino revenue had fallen to $3.3 billion, nearly $2 billion gone in 4 years. Executives cut staff. They cut costs. They closed properties outright. None of it brought back a single player, because Atlantic City didn't need to spend less. It needed to attract whales, the handful of gamblers willing to bet 6 figures a hand, and those gamblers now had options. Vegas,
Let's check the flight information
Macau,
here.
a casino floor 20 minutes from home. The standard perks,
What about the
a free
dining
suite,
options
a
instead?
comped dinner, a private jet, weren't special anymore. Every casino offered them. So Atlantic City reached for something Las Vegas had used for years, but the boardwalk had always been too cautious to try: the loss rebate. The mechanics were simple enough to explain in a sentence. Lose a set amount at the table, and the house hands a percentage of it back. 10% was standard. Some properties pushed to 15%. Lose $100,000, get $10,000 back, and the net loss is $90,000. It looked generous. It was still, on paper, a losing bet. The math still favored the house, just by less. Tropicana, Borgata, and Caesars all started dialing up their offers that year, competing against each other for the same short list of proven high-stakes names. One of those names belonged to Don Johnson. He wasn't a celebrity. He wasn't a tech billionaire or a hedge fund manager killing time at a card table. Don Johnson ran a company called Heritage Development, building computer-assisted wagering systems for horse racing. Before that, he'd managed Philadelphia Park Racetrack, and before that, he had spent years as a state gaming regulator in Oregon, Idaho, Texas, and Wyoming. He didn't just know how to play blackjack. He knew the gambling industry from the inside, the math behind every game, and exactly how far a casino could be pushed at the negotiating table. So what happens when 3 casinos, all desperate for the same list of names, all reach for the same man? Late in 2010, Don's phone rings. The caller ID shows a 609 area code, Atlantic City. Tropicana, offering a special arrangement for a premium player, asking if he'd be interested in discussing some very favorable terms. He listens. He doesn't commit to anything. He takes notes. The next day, another call, this time Borgata. They understand he's a sophisticated player, they say, and they'd like to offer an exclusive arrangement, better than anything else on the boardwalk. He listens again, more notes. The day after that, Caesars calls, and this time the pitch is even more direct. Terms, they tell him, that they have never offered anyone before. They want his business. Meanwhile, at Borgata, an executive is drafting an exclusive proposal, certain no other casino has approached this particular player yet. Meanwhile, at Caesars, another executive is doing exactly the same thing, equally certain. None of the 3 know the others are dialing the same number that same week. Don doesn't respond to any of them right away. He doesn't get excited, doesn't jump at the numbers being thrown around. Instead, he picks up the phone and calls a mathematician. Several mathematicians, in fact. PhDs in probability theory who understand the mechanics of casino games at the deepest level available. He gives them a precise set of conditions to run. A 6-deck shoe, the dealer standing on soft 17 instead of hitting, doubling down allowed on any 2 cards, resplitting aces allowed, late surrender allowed, $100,000 maximum bet per hand, and a 20% loss rebate on any session where he's down $500,000 or more. I need the exact edge, he tells them. Mine and theirs. The mathematicians spend days on it. Computer simulations, probability models, expected value analysis run again and again under slightly different assumptions. When they finally call back, the answer isn't close, and it isn't what anyone at 3 different casinos expects to hear. Under these exact conditions, especially that 20% rebate, the edge belongs to the player, not the house. Play it correctly, quit at the right thresholds, manage each session with discipline, and the advantage isn't just neutral, it's reversed. Conservatively, they tell him, a session run correctly is worth somewhere around $175,000 a day, purely from the mathematics of the deal. The casinos hadn't just offered a good deal to lure back a whale, they'd done the math wrong, badly, and hadn't noticed. There's a catch, and Don knows it before the mathematicians even finish explaining it. He needs all 3 casinos to sign, not just one. One deal alone is worth maybe $2 million. 2 signed deals, $5 or $6 million. All 3, and the total climbs past $15 million. But casinos talk to each other, compare notes, circulate blacklists on players who've caused trouble. One casino saying no and warning the other 2 would end the entire plan before it started. He has 1 shot, 3 phone calls, 3 separate negotiations, and no room for any of them to compare notes before all 3 contracts are signed. In December 2010, Don walks into Tropicana for the first negotiation. No suit, no gold watch, no jewelry that says money. Gray hoodie, jeans, a baseball cap, a man built to look like a nobody, and that's entirely the point. High rollers usually want the VIP treatment, want the casino to know exactly who's walking in. Don wants the opposite. He wants them to underestimate him completely. A casino host greets him warmly and walks him into a private office where the contract is already sitting on the table. 20% rebate on any session lost above $500,000, 6-deck blackjack with favorable house rules, $100,000 maximum bet, and a $1 million front money deposit required before he can play. Sounds good, Don says, casual, unhurried. I'd like to adjust a few things. He starts small. The dealer should stand on soft 17, not hit. Most casino tables do the opposite, but the host agrees. It reads as a minor preference. Resplitting aces should be allowed. Unusual, but fine. They can accommodate that too. Late surrender, available on request. Done. Each request, taken alone, shaves only a fraction of a percent off the house edge. Together, they add up to something the host never stops to calculate. Because he isn't focused on percentages, he's focused on the $1 million deposit sitting in front of him, and the odds that a whale eventually loses it all back. To him, these sound like the preferences of a man who simply likes things a certain way. Nobody in that room does the arithmetic on what these small concessions actually add up to. Then Don adds the one term that matters more than all the others combined. The rebate, he says, should apply per session, not per trip, not per month. Lose $500,000 tonight, get the rebate immediately. Walk in again tomorrow, and the counter resets to 0. The host decides it barely changes anything. If anything, it just gives Don more reason to keep coming back. He has no idea it's the piece that locks the entire mathematical structure into place. They sign. Don wires his $1 million deposit. The deal is done. Borgata signs a nearly identical contract days later. Caesars follows soon after. 3 separate deals, 3 sets of executives, none of whom know the others exist. And in private conversations, Don only mentions much later, At least one casino, possibly all three, agrees to something even stranger. $50,000 in cash, paid to Don simply for showing up to play, guaranteed whether he wins or loses. Combined with the mathematical edge from the rebate and the favorable table rules, his expected profit now sits somewhere between $175,000 and $200,000 a day. The casinos believe they've signed a whale who will eventually lose millions. They've actually signed 3 contracts guaranteeing he wins. He can't start winning immediately, though. That would be suspicious. That would trigger every alarm a casino has. So he plays it slow and lets them believe, for months, that what they're watching is nothing more than luck. December 2010, first real session, Caesars. Don deposits his front money and sits down at the table, calm, unremarkable. The plan is simple. Play until he's up $500,000 or down $500,000, then stop, regardless of the cards. Wins, a loss, wins again. After a few hours, he's up $450,000, close to his target. He plays a little longer, careful, not greedy, and finishes the session up. He cashes out and leaves. To the pit bosses watching him go, $450,000 barely registers. Not for a high roller session, not enough to worry about. He'll probably give it back next time, they tell each other. 2 weeks later, he's back, and this time the cards run hot, genuinely hot. Hand after hand falling his way, and within a few hours, he's up $600,000. He could press it further. He stops instead, cashes out, walks away. Variance, the pit bosses tell themselves. It happens to everyone eventually. January 2011, Borgata. Same plan, same discipline. Up $500,000, stop, leave without a word. A week later, he returns and wins $700,000. Now Borgata is watching closer than Caesars ever did, pulling the security footage and running it back frame by frame, looking for a signal, a pattern, a count, anything that explains 4 winning sessions in a row. There isn't one to find, just a man playing textbook basic strategy and, as far as anyone in that room can tell, simply getting lucky. February 2011, back to Caesars. $800,000 more. Caesar's total losses to Don have now crossed $2 million, and for the first time, management is nervous enough to ask out loud whether they can cut him off before this goes any further. The contract says no. He hasn't cheated. He hasn't counted a single card. There is no cause, and without cause, there is no way out of the deal they signed. March 2011, Borgata again, but this session runs the other way. Down $300,000, down $500,000, down $800,000. The pit bosses feel something close to relief settle over the floor. He stops there, takes his 20% rebate, $160,000 back, for a net loss on the session of $640,000. Finally, they tell each other he's giving some of it back. What nobody in that room bothers to add up is that across his earlier Borgata sessions, Don is still up more than $500,000 overall, even counting tonight's loss. He has just handed them, deliberately, exactly the story they wanted to believe. A gambler who wins some and loses some, nothing more sinister than ordinary variance. Then comes April 2011, and Tropicana, the session he has spent 4 months building toward. 10 in the morning. Don sits down at a freshly shuffled 6-deck shoe. First bet, $100,000. Blackjack, natural 21, $150,000. Second hand wins another $100,000. 2 hands in, he's up $250,000. The pit boss watches and tells himself it's normal variance, the way it always is early in a session. By 1 in the afternoon, 3 hours into the session, Don is up $1.2 million. A crowd has started to gather around the table. Tourists, other players, a few staff who've drifted over on their break. Security pulls the footage from every angle, looking for card counting, dealer collusion, anything that explains what they're watching. They find nothing. By 3 that afternoon, 5 hours in, he's up $2.1 million. Management calls in outside game protection specialists who watch the tape frame by frame and reach the same conclusion everyone else already has. Perfect basic strategy. No counting, no edge play any of them can name or prove. 6 o'clock. 8 hours at the table, and the stack in front of him has grown into something the floor staff keep glancing at instead of the cards. Up $3.8 million. A pit boss approaches and asks, gently, whether he'd like to take a break, maybe get some dinner. Don knows exactly what the question really means. They want him to stop before the number gets any worse. No thanks, he says. Let's keep playing. The contract gives him the right to sit at that table as long as he wants, win or lose, and there is nothing anyone in that pit can do about it, except keep watching. By 11 hours in, he's up $5.2 million. The CEO is called down to watch from the security room in person and asks someone to get the mathematicians on the phone. Is this deal still positive for the house, or did we sign away more than anyone understood at the time? Nobody has an answer fast enough to matter. Don is still at the table, still betting $100,000 a hand, and the shoe keeps getting reshuffled and dealt. 10 o'clock, 12 hours in, Don is dealt 2 eights. The dealer is showing a 6. He splits them, $200,000 now sitting on the felt in front of him. The first 8 draws a 3, he doubles down, $300,000 riding on that hand alone, and pulls a 10 for 21. The second 8 draws a 2, he doubles again, $400,000 total on the table, and pulls a 9 for 19. The dealer turns over a 6, hits on the house's mandated soft 17, draws a king, and busts. Both hands win at once. $400,000 on a single deal, and for a moment the room goes completely quiet before it erupts. The total for the session, $5.8 million. The largest single loss in Tropicana's history. Don stands up. I'm done, cash me out. The count takes 3 passes before anyone in the cage is willing to believe the number. He walks out calm, no celebration, nothing that looks like a man who just won a fortune. Behind him, the casino is already on the phone to the other 2 properties, asking the only question that matters now, has this man been taking money from you too? Borgata, $5 million. Caesars, $4 million. Add it to Tropicana's own number and the total comes to $15 million. From one player, across 6 months, every dollar of it legal and fully documented. The casinos do not take the loss quietly. Lawyers start reviewing the contracts line by line, hunting for a clause, a loophole, any argument that this wasn't fair play after all. Their reasoning, once it surfaces, is almost elegant in its hypocrisy. The house is allowed to use mathematics to take a player's money. That's simply how the business has always worked. But when a player uses the same mathematics to take theirs, it suddenly looks, to the people who wrote the contract, like exploitation. Like something that ought to be illegal, even though nothing about it broke a single written rule. In May 2011, 1 month after the Tropicana session, the casino fires its CEO, Mark Giannantonio, and blames him publicly for approving the deal in the first place. Every casino on the boardwalk cancels its high roller rebate program within weeks of hearing the final number. The new ceiling, written into policy across the industry, is 10%. Don Johnson himself is banned, not just from Atlantic City, but from casinos in Las Vegas and Macau. Everywhere the industry has a say in who gets to sit at a table. The bigger question hangs over all of it. Was any of this actually legal? The New Jersey Division of Gaming Enforcement opens a formal investigation, pulls the security footage, reads every contract line by line, interviews the people who signed them. Their conclusion is unambiguous. No cheating, no card counting. He played, precisely and consistently, within the rules the casinos had negotiated and signed themselves. The casinos threaten lawsuits anyway, circling lawyers around the contracts one more time. Don's own lawyer sends back one line. No laws were broken. You wrote the terms. Sue and we'll countersue. And you'll lose. Weeks pass. The threats go quiet, one casino at a time. Every legal team that looks closely reaches the same conclusion. The contracts are airtight, and there is no case worth bringing. Nobody files. Don Johnson keeps all $15 million. Every rule he played by, the casinos wrote themselves. Every dollar he took, they signed off on first. The industry spent decades selling one certainty: the house always wins. Somewhere in Atlantic City, that sign is still hanging. Nobody has taken it down.